Hello and welcome to the live Selection Sunday bracket breakdown here from The Gambler. We've got an hour and 20 minutes ahead of you of breaking down every angle from the bracket we just got here on Selection Sunday. We got you for an hour 20. We're going to have Sam Ostry from The Score and from The Gambler here popping in just a minute. We're going to have my co-host on the Tough Cover Radio Show, Sean Bernard, popping in here in just a minute. We're going to have Joe Tanzi popping in from later on in the show. And then at 8 o'clock, we've got our guys, Sean Brace, Nick McClay, and Ryan Beef Coyle down in the bracement at Sean Brace's house. And they're going to be covering everything and they're probably going to have lines. Hopefully we get some lines out during this show. Usually I feel like they leak around 7:30 for the lines for the games and the times for the games. And we got our guy Sam popping in here. Happy holidays, Sam. It's one of the best days of the sports calendar. How are we feeling?
It sure is. I'm feeling great. Not too happy with the 1 seed in Maryland's region at all. Would have loved to seen Duke. Would have loved to seen potentially Auburn. Florida, I think, is the best of all the 1 seeds, but we'll talk about all that. But I'm doing great, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And yeah, there's so much to get to, so many things to cover. I guess my first question to you, how do you handle Selection Sunday? Do you have an empty bracket that you're filling out along the way? That's what I've got the empty bracket that I wrote the names in here. That's a tradition for me. Everybody's got their own way of handling it. How do you handle Selection?
Yeah, so the last 2 years I've done shows for it. So really I'm just I'm writing down every matchup of each region. I don't even look at the bracket. I think about who was going. I'm really just writing notes, like very quick bullets. Of course, do a lot of notes in the beginning coming in to prepare, but just writing notes of bullets quick of the matchups, who I think could win, who I think could go far. So really just writing down the matchups, putting in the notes, thinking of who I could win, but I don't do a whole bracket just yet. I like to let it simmer.
Let's do, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. And let's go region by region, and let's do it the way that, in the order that they presented it. And I'll present my screen here, and we'll take it from, I believe this is the South region as the top, with Auburn as the number 1 overall seed, which, first of all, I think is preposterous that Auburn got the number 1 overall seed, considering, the fact that you have them losing 3 of 4 games leading into the tournament. I don't think that's ever happened for a number 1 overall seed in history before. I thought it probably would have made more sense for Duke to be the number 1 overall seed, or for maybe even Houston to be the 1 seed. I know that most people don't agree with that, but what was your take on Auburn getting the 1?
Yeah, look, it's just one of those things where this is pretty much decided days ago, like before the conference tournaments start, really towards the end of the regular season. So I think if up to me, I'm giving Duke the number 1 overall seed, but you have to understand that this committee valued the SEC and how deep and talented this SEC team was. I think it was 14 teams ended up getting in. The over-under a couple weeks ago was 12.5. So this team, including Texas and including Oklahoma, or Oklahoma's in the Big 12, but including Texas and some of these other bubble teams, they got in the dance, and then that's just kind of how it goes where they're valuing the SEC. So of course they're going to give Auburn that number 1 seed over a team like Duke, who played a really weak ACC schedule.
And then when you go down the list of when they were revealing this, it was probably 5 straight teams that think they got too low of a seed. Louisville comes in as an 8, which is shocking after the run they made in the ACC tournament. I think they were being seeded as a 6 by Palm today. I don't know where Lunardi had them, but it's shocking to see them drop down to an 8th. Not exactly an easy matchup there for Auburn, especially letting them play in Lexington, which not a far drive from Louisville. You got Creighton at a 9 after the run they made in the Big East tournament. You thought maybe they'd get up to a 7 seed, but they'd probably be an 8, seeded down there as a 9. Not that there's a huge difference between an 8 and a 9. Michigan, I was seeing seeded as a 3 seed today by Palm, and they go and win the Big Ten tourney, and it doesn't matter. They're down there at a 5 with a 12 seed, who some people thought might have been in if they lost. If they, that would have inferred them being an 11 seed or better. So that's, and then Texas A&M probably feels like they're properly seeded as a 4, but I mean, a week ago they were like a 2 seed. So there's a bunch of straight teams that did not love their draw here, I'm sure. and we can get to the bottom half of the region. But this top half of the region, what's your kind of overall takeaway?
Yeah, this was an incredibly difficult draw for Auburn to play Louisville or Creighton. And the lines are coming out as we're talking, so we're going to react to them live. Louisville is a -1.5 point favorite over Creighton, that opening line.
Not touching that one.
I am, because I love Creighton. I think Creighton,
Wow.
and I know you agree with me. Like,
I
Creighton
love
is
both these
criminally-
teams. But it sucks for me.
I do too, but I think Creighton is criminally underrated. I think both these teams are underrated just based on the seeding that they got. They deserve, based on their resumes, that higher than 8-9. But what we saw is that the committee really didn't value the ACC at all, and it's not like they should have. The ACC was horrible, except for putting North Carolina in, which they've no business being in the tournament. But as it comes out, the North Carolina's athletic director is the head of this year's selection committee. So I didn't even think about that when we were talking about it yesterday. So of course they get in, even though they've no business being in. I thought it was going to be over a team like Texas or Xavier, but it ended up being over Indiana. There is no way that you can put a UNC team in a horrible ACC with one quad one win over an Indiana team with 4 quad one wins and no losses past the quad 2. So just a little side tangent. It doesn't really matter once you react to the snubs because we move on and we talk about the matchups. But Indiana should have been in the stands over North Carolina. North Carolina has no business being in. But a loss, they get in. I will say this Louisville Creighton, like to your point, both these teams are underseeded. I would have put them on like the 7, maybe even on the 6 line for a team like Louisville. I think is really impressive. Yeah. That is a tough draw for Auburn.
And it's not an easy draw. I think whoever you get out of that 5-12 matchup, I actually think whoever wins that 5-12 is going to beat Yale, which we can get into upsets a little later on.
Oh, so you think Yale's winning?
I love Yale in that game.
All right, so let's talk about these matchups then.
Yeah, let's get into it. And I think Louisville Creighton is one I will not be betting. I'm going to pick Louisville in my bracket just because how they've been so good here as of late, since December 15th, 21-2, with a top 20 offense and a top 20 defense, 11-1 in their last 12, and that's an 8 seed. And you're Auburn, you're the number 1 overall seed. That's who you could see, and not to mention Creighton, the team I love, 15-4 since January 4th, the number 27 offense, number 38 defense in that stretch. McDermott has made back-to-back Sweet 16s, 3 of the last 4 years he's made Sweet 16s, including an Elite 8 in there. That is one of the best 8-9 matchups I can ever remember in the tournament, and that's just one I'll have to see what the total is. Maybe that'll have a play, but I can't imagine I'll bet on that one.
144.
I have to dive into the numbers there a little bit, but I don't think I'll have a play on that game. But man, it's going to be a fun one to watch. And it's kind of the same thing with the 5-12. The first two, obviously 116, you know what you're going to get. But the 8-9 and the 5-12, these are the first 2 matchups that were revealed to us. I was like, these are nightmares for me to pick because Michigan's been a team, even when people were out on Michigan and throwing in the towel, I was saying the way that they have these 2 bigs, it is a tough matchup on a night-to-night basis, especially in like a tournament setting. I think they proved that in the Big Ten tournament, marching their way through a couple close wins. They've found a way to win a lot of close games this season. But UC San Diego seems to be a nightmare matchup for Michigan. Michigan, their big problem all year has been turning the ball over. Do they have the guard play? And that's obviously more important than ever in March. UC San Diego, they are 6th in turnovers per game offensively. They don't turn the ball over. But more importantly, they're 2nd in forcing turnovers. I think that's a nightmare for Michigan. UC San Diego also top 10 in 3-point rate. They absolutely fire it away from deep, and they're pretty efficient from it as well. It's not like they're firing and missing. I'm going with UC San Diego here with a little 12-13 second round matchup. And I think UC San Diego goes all the way to the Sweet 16.
So I'm completely in on with you on UC San Diego beating Michigan. First off, this Michigan team was really reeling down the stretch of the regular season. Had dropped a bunch of games to some of the better teams in the Big Ten. They go on this run. It's hard to win 4 games in 4 days. Don't get me wrong. That is an incredible accomplishment, winning 4 games in 4 days. But we often see teams do that, and then they stumble in the NCAA tournament. Of course, you have a team like NC State who was just on this incredible Cinderella run, who won 5 in 5 games last year, and then, of course, make the Final Four. This Michigan team's playing on Thursday. They were probably praying that they were playing on a Friday to get an extra day off. They just played 4 games in 4 days, an impressive stretch, of course, to win the Big Ten tournament title. They're losing on Thursday. Like that is a tough turnaround. They are losing on Thursday. So I got UC San Diego beating Michigan. I thought Michigan was going to have a tough draw and they were going to lose regardless. I mean, the matchup obviously depended on the matchup, but I was going to really target Michigan's opponent when it's a team like UC San Diego, which has better guard play. We know what Vlad and Danny Wolf are in that Michigan front court. That backcourt for UC San Diego is better than Michigan's backcourt. Yep. When you have better guard play, that's what you can win in March. I love this UC San Diego matchup. And the line agrees. Michigan only opening as a 3.5-point favorite. That is an absolute one of my favorite plays of this entire first round. UC San Diego on the money line. But then on the other side, I know you transitioned here, but on the Yale-Texas A&M matchup, I'll read you a little stat that I sent to you. But it's very rare for mid-majors to go to back-to-back tournaments and have upsets in both of them. It's only happened twice. It was Middle Tennessee State in 2016, 2017, and then Harvard in 2013, 2014. So Yale obviously upset Auburn in that 4-13 matchup last year. Now Yale has another difficult matchup against the Texas A&M team where they can match the physicality of Texas A&M. Texas A&M is it's the best offensive rebounding team in the entire country. And so you have this Yale group that is just as physical and are going to not dominate the glass against a team like Texas A&M, but it's going to be a pretty comparable matchup when you have two of the great rebounding teams, two physical rebounding teams, and they're really going to neutralize Texas A&M's advantage on the glass. So I think it's a more interesting game. I'm sure Texas A&M isn't happy about that draw. Texas A&M opens 7.5-point favorite. I'm not touching the points in that, but I'd be surprised if Yale pulls off another first-round upset. So I got a Texas A&M and UC San Diego, and then I'll go UC San Diego to advance.
And real quick, and I guess the counterpoint is like, my dog agrees. The Yale Bulldogs, she loves it. But I guess I'll throw to you. Would you rather have that number and know it's been brutal for the teams who have tried to repeat after a year as a mid-major? Or do you look at that as a positive for experience? Like, I do think that a lot of these guys, same team to the next year, I think there's a factor to be had about them having experience from last year.
I think it's more that it's like a lot of luck comes in an upset like that when you're the worst team. A lot of luck comes to pull off that upset, and I think that's kind of why you don't see it often, where these teams don't get lucky year in and year out pulling off upsets like that. I will just say real quick at the top of that bracket, Creighton. It'll be interesting what the line is. Obviously, Auburn will be favored, assuming Creighton beats Louisville and advances, and I like Creighton to advance. I'll be betting that at -1.5. Hopefully, it doesn't move too much in or a +1.5. Hopefully, it doesn't flip the other way and Creighton becomes favored, because I like Creighton to advance. That Creighton-Auburn matchup is a really interesting matchup. We know Auburn coming into this tournament has lost 3 of their last 4. Don't look as good. They're the best 3-point defense in the country. They allow the fewest 3-point makes in the entire country, so they're phenomenal at that. But that's like Creighton is a high-powered offense, but not for their standards. One thing that Auburn's really going to have to struggle with is Creighton plays a drop coverage. So they just put Ryan Kalkbrenner in drop, and they force teams to shoot a lot of threes. Auburn, they can make threes. They're not a 3-point specialist team. They like to play inside through Janai Broome. So I think they're going to struggle against that Creighton matchup, assuming that's the game. I'm not picking one way or the other just yet. Don't be surprised if Creighton's in the Sweet 16.
No, I would not be shocked if either of Creighton or Louisville beats Auburn, but I will say outside of that 8-9, I think you've got to love the draw for Auburn. Like, I think it's a pretty, I don't know if you think the 4 or the 5 are all that scary. Iowa State and Michigan State probably as favorable a 2-3 as you could have gotten in this bracket. So let's go to the bottom half here, though. And I know UNC, we all think that they shouldn't be in. I will say, the teams that they left out for UNC are the right teams. If they were going to figure out a way to get
in. Indiana.
That's fine. They're the one that's the toughest
that's the only one. Yeah.
I'm happy they left Boise out. We don't need another Mountain West team. You had your chance against Colorado State. That was a playoff game. I think that's fine. Let that game matter. And West Virginia was a team who I think absolutely stinks. And good on the committee for not just putting them in because everyone had them in. You look at 6-9 since mid-January with the number 167 offense in that stretch. I'm good. I don't need to see West Virginia. Since they lost Tucker DeVries, they are not an interesting team, and that was pretty early in the year. So
I'm with you on West Virginia because that team started out playing really well, and everyone kind of just assumed they have been awful recently. So they
Awful.
have no business being in the dance. Um, I will say every year, like I dive into bracketology, and every year these guys are all so wrong in the bubble. I mean,
So
just
wrong.
so wrong. Like they have no idea. There's really no point of even like looking at the bracketologist bubble and I don't know exactly how the seeding and the matchups panned out. I haven't dove into which bracketologists were more right than others just yet, but they are dead wrong in the bubble. I mean, all of them had UNC out, Texas out. They all had Boise State in. I mean, they were just all had Indiana in, most had West Virginia in. They were just dead wrong. They had no idea what the bubble was going to look like, and that's how it is most years. So I don't even know why we always just surround our opinions of who's going to be in or not based on the bracketologist when they're as wrong or right as us.
So let's keep it moving. So we look at the bottom half of this region. Ole Miss against either of these teams. Are you taking Ole Miss, or I know that there's some stats out there that at least one of these kind of first four teams usually gets to the Sweet 16, if not at least wins a game. I'll tell you what, all this talk about UNC, if Carolina beats San Diego State, I like them against Ole Miss.
As much as they don't deserve to be in this bracket, I'm 100% with you. I could easily see North Carolina not just beating Ole Miss, but making a little bit of a run against the Iowa State team that's going to be missing Keyshawn Gilbert. So for the entire tournament. So if they can even get past Lipscomb. So I think North Carolina could be in the Sweet 16, but they have no business being in the bracket, but they are. And I like North Carolina in that game, assuming it's North Carolina over San Diego State.
If it's San Diego State, I like Ole Miss. But I will say if you're Iowa State, I don't think that's a scary 6-11 there for you. It could have been worse you're kind of banged up. I think Iowa State's getting to the Sweet 16. So I've got Iowa State over hopefully UNC, but potentially Ole Miss there in the second round. Moving to the bottom half, you already know from me, not going to dive too deep into Marquette, New Mexico. I'm overvaluing the Big East, if anything. I think the Big East is getting screwed on some of these seeds. I think this is probably fair for Marquette, but they got a great draw here. I think New Mexico stinks. They're actually the best team, according to Bart Torvik, in the entire Mountain West, but still the number 79 offense, number 38 team in the country. That's your best team in the conference. I'm out on the Mountain West. Give me Marquette. I'm excited to see what the line is on that game. If Marquette's anything under 3, I'll really, really like Marquette in that matchup. But having said that about Marquette, I think this is a great draw.
Minus 3.5. Marquette minus 3.5.
I'll be on Marquette 3.5. I don't love it, but I'll be on 3.5. But Michigan State, pretty good draw for the Spartans here. I think it's Michigan State, Iowa State in the Sweet 16. Give me Michigan State all the way to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I'll probably go with Michigan State to all the way to the Elite Eight. But that Marquette matchup, and I'm with you, I think Marquette rolls past New Mexico. That Marquette-Michigan State matchup is tough for Michigan State. Again, I think Marquette is underseeded as well. I think they should have been probably on the 6th line. So that Marquette-Michigan State matchup is really tough for Michigan State. I could see a potential upset. I love this Michigan State team. I don't love it in terms of the national championship contention. With this draw, I think Michigan State escapes to the Sweet 16 and then the Elite Eight, whether it's Iowa State or North Carolina or whoever it is. Iowa State, by the way, huge favorite over Lipscomb, 13.5 point favorite.
And I don't like any of these lines you're giving me, but I didn't like that region when it got released. So let's move on to these other regions. I think I'll probably have some better takes on the lines, hopefully. And I think that the overall kind of sentiment for me in this, I believe this is the East region for Duke. What a draw for the Dukies. I mean,
they got blessed.
I am not an Arizona guy, not really an Oregon guy. I'm not really all that intrigued by either 12 or 13 there. 8 or 9, you avoid kind of even if you're not a big UConn guy, you avoid Danny Hurley, you avoid Gonzaga, you avoid Louisville and Creighton. Like, I don't think you get a dangerous 8-9 here. I think it's Mississippi State. I don't love that matchup, but I'll go Mississippi State. Baylor is really just limped in. I think they're 10 and 11 in their last 21 games, and Big 12 is a good conference, but 10 and 11 is pretty crazy. So, and I will say the metrics still like them in that stretch, even in that 21 game stretch. They're top 25 in offense, top 50 in defense. But Mississippi State, Chris Jans had some success in the tournament in the past. So, give me the Bulldogs there.
Let's look at the line for that Baylor. Baylor opening as a minus 1.5 point favorite over Mississippi State. Duke's
Yeah, I love it.
draw, they got blessed. This is a phenomenal draw. I will be shocked. Number one, Cooper flags me back with or without Cooper flag. I would have
Yep.
been shocked if Duke is not in the Elite Eight. And it's such a great draw that Duke jumped Auburn as the favorite to win the entire thing now. So we're looking at the
Yep.
odds board for the whole thing. Duke is plus 320. Florida now is the second best odds, plus 450. Auburn plus 500. Houston plus 750. Alabama and Tennessee plus 1,600. But Auburn was the favorite before the bracket reveal. So that's how great of a draw Duke had. I'm with you on this. Oregon, I think, will beat Liberty. Let's look what that line is, but I don't think Oregon's a serious threat. Oregon minus 5.5 over Liberty. And then you have that Arizona Akron matchup, and Arizona's minus 14.5. So they're a huge favorite. I don't see Arizona being upset in that game. I think it's going to be you like Akron?
I'll definitely be on Akron with the points there. I think this Arizona team, Tommy Lloyd, is a generational fraud when it comes to the tournament. And also you look at Arizona. I don't believe that the shooting is going to work in March. I get the offense is graded out well all year long. They're 294th in 3-point rate, 249th in 3-point efficiency.
They play so fast. Like both these teams play so fast.
I think that Akron with the 3-point rate that they have, and Arizona not three's more than two. And yeah. I know the athletes. I think Akron's going to be able to stick with them just off 3-pointers, and Arizona not taking enough of them. But I think not a huge Oregon guy this year. I think they've been since January 1st, they're 12-8, 51st in Bartorvik. But Dana Altman in March is an absolute machine. Give me Oregon to the Sweet 16 and give me Duke without flag. Even if they could hold them out to the Elite Eight, I think Duke cruises to the Elite Eight. So
and this is what I wanted when this 4 seed was coming out. I wanted Maryland to have that 4 seed because I thought number one, I wanted Duke.
I like your draw better than that personally.
I think to get to the Sweet 16, but Florida scares me more than any other 1 seed right now.
We'll talk about it. I got Maryland winning that game, but we'll talk.
All right, we'll get there.
We'll talk about the bottom of the East region here. We got BYU, VCU initials game. Hate this game. I'll be on VCU in the bracket. This is a nightmare matchup. Both teams really like. I will say VCU. You look at how good they've been lately, and I think they should have got in even if they lost today. 12-1 since the start of February. Number 17 offense, number 33 defense. Great guard play. 4 guys in double figures. 2 bigs who have 1.5 blocks or more per game. And BYU, another one of these teams. I've had a couple of these pop up. Have lost their last 5 tournament games dating back to Jimmer in 2011, which is their only Sweet 16 appearance in their last 21 appearances over the last 40 years. So not a ton of success in the tournament for BYU. Not that really matters, just a fun little nugget. Give me VCU in that matchup with Wisconsin, who I have cruising past VCU and Wisconsin on to the Sweet 16. Or on Wisconsin, I reversed it.
Yeah, this is the chalkiest region to me. I will be shocked if it's not Duke, Alabama in the Elite Eight. I mean, every year you're going to have some crazy upsets, but every year you're also going to have just a 1-2 matchup. The 2 best teams in the region advance into the Elite Eight. This is the region it's coming from. I think Alabama got a great draw. Vanderbilt St. Mary's a very interesting game because St. Mary's a great offensive rebounding team, but Vanderbilt has so much experience going through SEC and some of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country that they had to play night in, night out, like a Texas A&M, like a Florida. So Vanderbilt has the experience.
What's that line?
Let's look at it right now. But Vanderbilt has that experience, but with battling elite rebounding teams. St. Mary's minus 4.5 is the line.
St. Mary's minus 4.5?
Yeah.
That's my play of the tournament. Vandy plus 4.5. I absolutely love Vandy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think a little neutralize St. Mary's on the glass, so I think you're right. I'll probably like that. Going back to that BYU VCU game, I'm going with BYU, but that is a really tough draw. Like I really love this BYU team, but that's a really tough draw. VCU is really good defensively, physical. That's kind of like another Big 12 team that BYU will have to face when they play VCU. So I'm going BYU. Then Wisconsin, Montana. I sent you this as well, but here's a stat about Montana. It was out of the Big Sky. The Big Sky is 3-39 in the NCAA tournament with an average margin of defeat by over 16 points. The last 3 out of the last 5 times Montana was in the tournament, they lost by 30 plus points. I don't think they have any chance. It just there's some teams that come from certain conferences where you play such a different style, and then you're matched up against a power conference team like Wisconsin, and you have no chance. Just stylistically, I think this is one of those games. I think Wisconsin wins easily. Let's look at that line real quick, because if it's a pretty big line,
17 and a half.
What is it?
17 and a half.
Wow. All right. That's massive. I don't know if I could touch that. I don't know if I could touch the 17 and a half, but I think Wisconsin rolls them. That's got to be the biggest. Oh, no, it's not the biggest.
Let's keep, yeah. So I think we both have Bama, Wisconsin coming out of that bottom region.
Yeah, I got Bama. Wisconsin, BYU is a tough one for me. Give me BYU, Alabama.
I'm going Wisconsin, Bama, and I'm going Bama on to the Elite Eight. So I've got 1 versus 2 in the first 2 regions we've covered here. But let's move on to the next one. Rapid fire here. I said going in, Houston was my champion. And there's some things that concern me about the path. Don't love the 8 seed. Don't love the 5 seed. But I think it could have been worse on the bottom half, talking about the Elite Eight. So overall, I'm probably not really either pleased or annoyed about the path here for Houston. But Ken Palm does have Gonzaga as a top 10 team. I think that's a tough matchup, though, with Georgia. That's a game I will not be touching. I see Gonzaga as a 5.5 point favorite here. I'm staying away from that one, but would not shock me at all if Georgia wins that game, especially shorter trip for Georgia to Kansas than obviously from Seattle with Gonzaga.
I have 2 plays I love in this top region. I agree with you. I think Houston advances, but I also think Gonzaga is a tougher matchup than Houston was probably hoping for. That's going to be a tough 1-8 game in that round of 32. I love McNeese here. Clemson, I'm not out on Clemson. I know you're a huge Clemson guy. I'm not out on Clemson. It's just a tough draw. Like McNeese is in the tournament back-to-back years. Obviously, they lost last year with Will Wade. It's probably Will Wade's last year in McNeese. He should get a Power 5 or Power Conference job. I think they're incredibly well coached. I think this is a game, and the line is 7.5. That is one of my favorite plays. Plus 7.5 McNeese over Clemson, and then Purdue High Point. Almost every tournament going back. Let's find the stat real quick. Almost every tournament, there is always one of the top 4 seeds loses one of the first round games. The High Point is beating Purdue in this. Purdue, Absolutely. Obviously, what?
Absolutely.
You're with me on that?
Yep.
All right. So at least, wrong stat. Let's find the right one here.
Purdue's 362nd in 2-point defense, by the way, since January 1st.
Yeah, so I'm on High Point. I think High Point has a chance to even make one of those a Sweet 16. You're always going to have one of these lowered seeded teams in the Sweet 16. I think Purdue, after their nice run last year with Zach Edey, after being upset the year before that as the number 1 seed, I think High Point wins that opening round matchup against Purdue.
We got Sean Bernard joining us over there. Sean _Bernard1. We're going through here on Twitter. Go and give him a follow, by the way, my Tough Cover Radio co-host. But we're going through the South region here, or no, the West region. My apologies, the West region with Houston. Any big takeaways from this top half of this bracket, Sean?
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by the Gonzaga and Georgia matchup there. That is one that I have my eye on. I know Gonzaga is a team that a lot of people have respect for. I will say personally, I think there's a little bit more respect for the Gonzaga, everything that comes with it, than this specific team, but they're still a good team, no doubt about it. I love this Houston team, and I know Mark Henry Jr. shares that exact same opinion there. It's awesome to just look at the bracket to see what we have in store here. I've still been kind of crawling through, circling the matchups that stand out to me. I do also share Sam's opinion that I like McNeese over Clemson here, that this Clemson team I do think has shown a little bit of cracks in the armor of late. That does concern me there. They're still good. It will be a battle, but I think that's going to be a trendy 12-5 matchup right there.
I love the matchup for Clemson. McNeese doesn't really worry me. I just think that they're not going to be able to match up athletically with Clemson. Clemson's 18-3 in their last 21 games, the top 20 offense and the top 15 defense. Really, it just seems like they're just not a good matchup with Louisville. They're 15-2 in their last 17 games with only losses to Louisville, a win over Duke in their top 20 offense, top 10 defense in that stretch. They also beat Kentucky in the non-con. But regardless of what we say about Clemson, I think the number one thing we could say about them is they handle below average teams to average
Sure.
teams, and not only handle them, but usually pummel them. So I won't be betting it, but I love the path that Clemson got to the Sweet 16. I'll be looking for a Sweet 16 future on Clemson more than betting that game, because I love the Purdue being there 4. But I don't love the upside for Clemson beyond that, obviously, with Houston in the top half of the region. So I was hoping Clemson would be maybe in the Maryland or kind of where Memphis is, over in the Florida region, or maybe even in the Auburn region where Michigan is. But tough draw for them. I'm going Houston over Gonzaga, Clemson over High Point here in the second round.
All right, so I found the stat real quick, so let me just read it to you. 15 of the last 16 tournaments, at least one of the top 4 seeds or seeds, anyone on the seed 1 to 4 line has lost. So there's going to be a team that's seeded 1 through 4 that's going to lose. It's Purdue and High Point plus 9.5. Love that. So I got McNeese and High Point. I'll have McNeese in the Sweet 16, and then I'll go Houston narrowly beating Gonzaga. So I got Houston, High Point, and of course Houston advancing to the Elite Eight.
I've had the 13 winning in every 4-13 we've done so far. I'm going Yale over A&M. I'm going Akron over Arizona, and I'm going High Point over Purdue for bracket purposes. And part of the reason for that is I like UCSD to get to the Sweet 16. I like Oregon to get to the Sweet 16, and I like Clemson to get to the Sweet 16. So I'm willing to mess around a little bit more on a matchup when I know that it's only worth 1 round of points, and I have them losing to the next round anyway. But Akron's more of a swing. I believe it with High Point. I've said week in and week out, I don't care who Purdue gets. This team is an absolute abomination down the stretch here. 3-6 in their final 9 games. And I get that they got far last year. Matt Painter is still Matt Painter once Zach Edey's not averaging 50 a game. Purdue was the 186th best defense in the last 6 weeks. So I'm out on them. Are we all Houston coming out of there at top half?
Yeah. And I will say, if McNeese makes a Sweet 16 run, as Sam just predicted there, their manager, shout out to my boy Amir over there, might pull in more in NIL than any player in this tournament.
Deserves it.
That's good.
He's a legend.
Bottom half here, I love that Xavier got in. I'm so happy. Yeah. They're favored against Texas in the first 4, rightfully so. I'll be on Xavier in that game. But I hate the matchup here with Illinois as a 6th seed. Illinois has shown the promise when they're able to get it going. They look like one of the best teams in the country. And they showed it for the first 2 months of the year, from November through mid-January. Illinois was 12-3. They were the number 5 team in the country in Bart Torvik. They also just closed the year 4-1 with wins over Purdue and Michigan sprinkled in there. They've got a lottery pick. Let me throw it to you guys. What do you guys think on that matchup?
Yeah, and to kind of even minimize it a little further there, I think beyond just Illinois as a team, it's Kasparis Giacchiunas who's the guy that when he's playing well, that team looks phenomenal. But there's so many stretches where he basically feels non-existent out there. Now, Xavier is going to be a tough draw. I'm with Mark that I think they're deservingly favored over Texas, and I do think that they will handle that game there. But I think Illinois is I feel bad. I wish there was a better kind of bottom of the bracket. I think we feel similarly about Tennessee with Rick Barnes and with kind of the outlook there. I don't believe Wofford will give him much of a challenge in the first half or the first game there. I do like Utah State over UCLA. I think that's kind of not a huge upset there, but the 10-7. And I do like Kentucky taking care of business by Troy. I bought more and more in on this Kentucky team as the season progressed. But any thoughts from you, Sam?
Yeah, UCLA minus 5.5.
Wow.
Over Utah State. So that's an interesting line. I really like Utah State there as well. Not high on this UCLA team. I 3 months ago, I thought this team wasn't even going to make the tournament when they're going through a rough stretch in the Big Ten, especially some of those East Coast matchups. And it's tough. A team out west has to travel east and play like teams like Maryland, Penn State, Rutgers, all those teams. I don't like this UCLA team at all. I love Utah State in that matchup. The more I look at the bottom half of this bracket, the more I'm thinking Houston has no chance of not being in the Final Four. Just none. And we talked about it yesterday where this team is pretty immune to upsets. It feels like they're just that dominant. I don't see anyone that can beat them. A lot of people are going to pick Kentucky, I feel like, as a popular pick. Kentucky hasn't strung together win streaks of 4, 5, 6 games. I don't trust it throughout their SEC conference schedule. And it wasn't against like the best teams in the SEC. I don't trust that they're going to do that on their way to an Elite Eight. Tennessee, I don't necessarily love Tennessee either. Illinois, I think, is a really good team. They mentioned on the broadcast, but Illinois has had 7 different starting lineups since January 8th. That's just a team that was killed by injuries, killed by a lot of illness around January, early February. This Illinois team is mostly pretty much healthy. They're back now. And they're playing really well to finish the regular season, 3 straight wins. I could see this Illinois team in the Elite Eight. So I'm going Illinois coming out of this bottom half of the bracket. Illinois, Houston, and then Houston advancing to the Final Four.
To be fair on Kentucky, this is a Kentucky team that beat Duke in the non-con, that beat Gonzaga in the non-con, beat Louisville in the non-con. They do have wins over Florida, A&M, Mississippi State, Tennessee twice, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, Missouri. Like, they have a ton of wins, and I get they haven't strung it together, especially in SEC play. They did string it together in the non-con a bit there. Obviously, some easy games sprinkled in there, but I'm going.
I will say about the non-con, it doesn't really matter to me that much. Like, it does to an extent when you're a team like Duke and you're playing in the ACC and you want to see how they match up against good teams. That was, and we've talked about this, where that was November.
I generally don't care about it too much either, but it's only in reference to a Kentucky team that is played a really brutal SEC schedule, even for the SEC. Like, obviously, some SEC schools played much easier schedules. Like, I know Florida didn't have quite as hard of a schedule as Auburn and Florida did. So it's hard to compare some of it, but I only have Kentucky winning 3 of them. I think Kentucky gets to the Elite Eight. I think they win their first round game, the second round game in their Sweet 16, and then I would love to bet Houston in that Elite Eight matchup against Kentucky.
Yeah.
So I think that's
it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Kentucky's in the Elite Eight. I just think that's Illinois is a tough draw as that 6th seed, and like I said, Illinois is healthy. Their team's back together, and they were playing well down the stretch of the regular season. So I like Illinois.
Mark Pope never made a second round, 0-2 in the tournament. It is a factor.
Yeah, that is a good point there. I will throw in, I'm a believer. Ortega Owe is a dude for Kentucky that he's really grown on me, and I think come on especially strong in the second half of the season. But beyond that, like, just kind of the roster to roster standpoint, this doesn't quite hold the same weight as some of the Kentucky teams. And obviously, we're in still an era of transition following the Calipari point, and that Mark Pope is really building out that program. But I've kind of liked what I've seen from Kentucky down the stretch. It feels like this team collectively is bought in a little bit. I think I'm going to talk myself in by the time we get there to them beating Illinois. I don't think they have any chance against a team like Houston, but I like the matchup, the draw against Troy. I think that's a pretty clean path there. And I also like the stance of with this matchup that Illinois, they're going to have to go to battle with likely Xavier, possibly Texas there, that I'm not rolling out Trey Johnson and company. I do think Xavier is rightfully the favorite there. But that to me is going to be a far more notable matchup as far as taking a toll on a team compared to Kentucky, who I think will handle things pretty easily.
And one more thing on the Kentucky mat, we do have to get to the next region. One more thing on the Kentucky thing. They beat Tennessee twice. The 2 times they played them. And if you're talking about the Sweet 16, a potential matchup there, they beat Tennessee in Knoxville by double digits. So I think that's a beautiful, whoever wins that 3-6, it could be Xavier, by the way, too. Like, if it's Kentucky, it's Illinois, it's Xavier. I like whoever it is to beat whoever comes out of that bottom half. By the way, there's always one matchup that depresses me to have to pick a team to win. That's UCLA. I'm going to advance UCLA just out of respect to Mick Cronin. But I think Tennessee, a team I don't really like all that much at all, and would have loved to have a good 7 or a 10 to knock them off early. I think Tennessee's got a free pass to the Sweet 16.
Yeah. Sam, you want to take it away there?
No, I was going to say I got nothing on that.
Yeah, I wish there was like a pathway where it was like I think this very easily, if the bracket had aligned differently, that we're talking about Tennessee as a serious fraud watch, potential first round upset. Just don't see it the way that things shake out. So they should be thankful for that. I do think that they've shown flashes where they look like this team played very well in the conference tournament, all these kind of things there. But yeah, I think we all feel that Tennessee doesn't deserve to be in quite that tier of real deal contenders in the way that they are seated in the way they should be.
Before we get Sam out of here, we got to talk about the last region. Got to talk about the Maryland Terrapins and his draw. And I'll just say it. I'll lead it off this way. The Maryland Terrapins are going to the Elite Eight. I like the draw for Maryland. I think that 5-12 is beautiful as a second-round matchup. Don't love Memphis. I think Colorado State gets it done there and moves on to the second round. And then I think Maryland takes care of business to the Sweet 16. I think I'm more sure Maryland will be in the Sweet 16 than I am with the Florida Gators, who have to deal with the defending back-to-back national champs in UConn. And I understand that UConn has been so up and down. They are 5-1 in their last 5, or in their last 6 coming in. They are a top 15 offense. So Florida gets it up and down. Obviously, a much better defense than UConn has. I don't. If you put truth serum in Todd Golden's creeper personality, I don't think he's telling you that he's happy that he drew Danny Hurley in the second round, UConn to the Sweet 16.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, look, that's going to be a really popular pick just because of UConn's pedigree and the back-to-back defending national champions. I'm here to tell you, I would be shocked if UConn beats Florida. I just don't think this UConn team is that good. And look, they got to get through a tough Oklahoma team. This Oklahoma team was 13-0 non-conference. What?
What's the line? Please tell me it's
4.5. UConn 4.5.
I was hoping to get like a 1.5 to snipe on UConn there. That would have been
that's a tough. Look, I think UConn's definitely going to win, but Oklahoma's a tough matchup. They were 13-0 non-conference, fell off a little bit, but have some big time wins earlier this season. Even though I said non-conference doesn't really mean
I'm kind of going against what I said with that earlier because I'm out on Oklahoma.
Whatever supports my opinion.
7-13 in the last 20, number 82 defense. I'm out.
Look, I think UConn's going to win for sure. I just don't think they're going to be this Florida team. Out of all the 1 seeds, I was more scared for Maryland matching up against Florida. I just think they've been so dominant. We talked yesterday about how I love their offensive style of play. It's really a pro style offense. They have bigs who can pass the ball. They have great guards. Of course, Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, all those guys. They're just Will Richard, everyone. Like they have so many unstoppable pieces, and that's why their offense is so good. And then they're a great offensive rebounding team, so they create extra possessions for themselves. I think this Florida team is so good. I did not want to see them. But I will say, in terms of a path to get to a Sweet 16, which would be a good year for Maryland if they got to the Sweet 16, I'd be happy. Look, I'm still in recovery from yesterday's defeat. How you possibly don't guard the inbounder and let him go coast to coast without anyone stopping the ball. You learn that stuff in elementary school, 4th grade basketball. Stop the ball, stop the ball, stop the ball. How they just didn't stop the ball with 4.5 seconds left. And we'd be on the 3 seed line probably.
No, you wouldn't. Michigan's a 5. They didn't care. The committee
that was because how Michigan ended the regular season. But that was because that Michigan ended the regular season. Maryland ended the regular season incredibly well, winning 10 of the last 12 games.
I think what they said is they did not care at all about that game and the outcome, which is what we complained about on Saturday, that the committee's not taking these games.
Yeah, it's more like, I mean, you're probably right. It's more the championship, though. For me, it was just that winning, advancing to the Big Ten final was enough when they were right in between that 4-3. And I don't think the committee respected Michigan from the end of the regular season, but Maryland had that respect because they were trending upwards and they would have kept going. Regardless, Wisconsin stayed on the 3. Like, I don't know who's and Maryland has a better resume than Wisconsin. They just do. Like, they have a better resume, beat them head-to-head, more quad 1 wins, finished higher in the Big Ten. Maryland has a better resume. Every KenPom, net ranking, everything. So how Wisconsin was on the 3 seed line and Maryland wasn't doesn't make any sense to me, but that's just how it played out.
But I'm here to tell you, I actually like how it played out for Maryland more than if they would have had the Michigan path and you go and win it. You get one last day in. We also saw them beat the crap out of a good team before. Who did they beat? Who did they beat right before they lost to Michigan?
Illinois.
Oh, they beat the tar out of Illinois in that game before they moved on and lost by a buzzer beater. Like, I'm not going to punish you by losing by 1 point in a buzzer beater in a semifinal when the next game also was won by like a point or whatever it was today, a couple points. So I actually like how it played out for Maryland. I love how the bracket broke out for Maryland. Sean Bernard, what do you think?
Look, so I'll just say real quick to your lips to God's ears, Mark. Like, I hope we can beat Florida, but I just don't feel good about it. But I'm with you that I like how it played out to the extent that I think they have a really easy trip to the Sweet 16.
Would love a Sweet 16 future.
As you should. Grand Canyon is not a difficult matchup. I think Maryland takes care of them easy. Memphis, Colorado State. Colorado State is a 3.5-point favorite over Memphis. That's a 12 that's favored over a 5. Yeah. I thought Memphis was going to win, but I don't. That's an interesting play if Colorado State's favored by 3.5. Neither of those teams worry me. I would love to see Memphis. I think they stink. They obviously had a lot of close games throughout the entire season in a weak American Athletic Conference. Just escaped in the championship game. I don't think Memphis is that good. So I love how it played out in terms of getting to the Sweet 16. But man, Florida just scares me.
Bernard? And here's where I stick my neck in a little bit to stick up for the Grand Canyon Antelopes here.
Why you gotta do that to me, Sean?
I will 100% be taking the plus 11.5 in favor of
Okay.
GCU. I think that they are a live dog as well. Maryland's a very good basketball team. They should win this game, no doubt about it. But this isn't a matchup that you should overlook. That Grand Canyon team, they strap up defensively, man. That's the biggest thing that I think this game is gonna be won and lost. That team's everywhere. They got a lot of long athletes that switch all over the floor. Tyon Grant Foster headlines things offensively there. He's had a tough shooting year, but there's other talent behind him. They added Jacoby Coles to the transfer portal, who I like quite a bit, and Duke Brennan is not a nobody who's going to be the primary matchup with Derek Queen there. I think this is going to be, I still think Maryland ultimately ends up probably getting the win moving on. Like, I don't think this is one that they should be, losing sleep over, but that isn't a matchup that I would take lightly if I'm Maryland right now, that if they can get a little foul trouble or, things get weird, which can happen in the tournament, GCU is that is a team that will take advantage if you give an opportunity. Maryland's got to be very careful not to.
But the thing is, and I got to get out of here in a second, but the thing is about Maryland, they're not one-dimensional. Like, they have a phenomenal defense and offense. Like, they can beat you in a game that's 62-60, or they can beat you in a game that's 86-82. So yes, Grand Canyon is a very good defensive team. Maryland has so many weapons. I talked about this yesterday, the best starting five, especially offensively, in the country. And I just even if they strap up, Maryland can also match that with their defense because they're not a one-dimensional basketball team. So I don't know if I'd lay the 11.5 with Maryland. That's a lot of points, but Maryland should win somewhat comfortably.
I'll get you out of here on this, Sam. Oh, what's up, Sean?
I was going to say, if Maryland gets into foul trouble, like, that's probably the number one thing that, like, if that happens, it might be game over with that because of, like you said, it is the best starting five. It's incredibly talented. Their first 5 names on that roster, but you look beyond it, and the drop-off is probably more significant than any other team in this tournament.
Yeah, you're right about that. The bench concerns, except Jordan Geronimo is playing well as a backup big, but other than him, the bench concerns are serious. Like, if they get him in the foul trouble, you kind of just have to play through that. Like, you really just do in a win and go home scenario. But foul trouble is the one thing that could really kill them.
Yeah, beyond the starting five, 3.6 points is the most points per game of any player on that team.
Yeah,
I think that matters more. Play for a reason. The Elite Eight, like the second matchup of the weekend, usually is when it matters more. I think that first matchup, you're usually able to spam kind of your starters, and like you said, obviously foul trouble is one concern. But Sam, I'll get you out of here on this. Your final four. How's it looking?
So this is a really interesting bottom half of the bracket. I love Arkansas in this game. Kansas has been for months now an ultimate fade the second they got into the tournament. What a phenomenal matchups in Providence, Rhode Island. You have Rick Pitino, you got John Calipari, you got Bill Self. That's just incredible going on in Providence, Rhode Island on Thursday. I love Arkansas in that game, and I like St. John's too. I really think St. John's. I think it's like there's always going to be an upset, but I feel chalk where it's St. John's, Florida, coming out of the West region. I also love UNCW. I love UNCW in this game. Let me look at the line right now before I give my final four. UNC won plus 15.5.
Wow.
That's a wild number. I love UNCW in that game. I think Drake advances. So I'll go St. John's over Drake to advance there. My final four. All right. Let's work through this. So first off, everyone knows the stat about KenPom and how the last 21 of the last 22 national champions have been top 25 and on offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. Based on that, there's only 7 teams that can win it. They're Florida, Auburn, Duke, Houston, obviously all the 1 seeds, and then some interesting names. You got Tennessee, Iowa State, and Clemson. I don't think any of those 3 teams are serious threats, but interesting names. And then you have 4 teams that just missed out on that could play themselves into top 25 offensive and defensive efficiency. That's Wisconsin, that's Maryland, that's Michigan State, and that's Louisville. My final 4. I guess let's work through this because I really haven't. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go. I think we're going to have a chalky year. I think Duke is going to be in the final 4. I think Florida is going to be in the final 4. I think Houston is going to be in the final 4. And I think Michigan State is going to be in the final 4. Not a lot of fun, nothing fun from what I just said. It's subject to change. I'm probably going to put a lower seed in there at some point. But I think out of that bracket, Michigan State, I could see Marquette if they somehow defeat Michigan State. But that's my final 4 as of now.
There it is. Yeah, I'm not too far off from it, but we'll get Sam out of there so he can go right for the score. Everybody go check him out at S. Ostreet on Twitter. Should have Joe Tanzi popping in here soon. Sam, thanks so much for coming on, man.
All right, boys. Thanks for having me. It's March, baby.
Yes,
It
sir.
is March. It is going to be a full week here from The Gambler of content all week long. I know Monday we've got a ton of stuff planned. We'll be doing stuff all week here. And I know coming up in a half hour at 8 o'clock, we've got Sean Brace, Ryan Beef Coyle, and Nick McClay coming from the Bracement here. Beef's favorite bets, how Nick McClay's feeling about Iowa State. Keyshawn Gilbert just got announced out for the tournament right as the tourney said. I think he's saying first round exit, which you gotta be concerned about Nick McClay. But let's talk about the bottom half of this region here, Sean. We didn't really get to we let Sam run through it. Missouri Drake is the toughest matchup for me to pick in this bracket. I have no idea what to do with it. Missouri's so fast paced, but you have a lot of and then Drake so slow paced. You have a lot of concerns with the offense, but a fantastic defense. Sorry, I thought I lagged out there for a second. But that's a matchup. I have the whole entire bracket filled out, every single slot. That's the one slot I don't have a slot in. I don't know which way to go. It doesn't really matter because I think Texas Tech beats either one of them. But anything from the bottom half of the region here, especially specifically that kind of quadrant.
Yeah, I mean, the top two games I'm a little more uncertain of. I was surprised to hear Sam's belief in UNCW that I would like to, and at another occasion, we'll definitely dig a little bit deeper in that conversation with him because I'm a big believer in this Texas Tech team and think that I see that this bracket shaping out to it being St. John's versus Texas Tech to kind of punch their ticket through beyond that. I love this St. John's team, man, that I'm really bought in what they're doing. Rick Pitino has them back. There's no doubt about that. And that is who I see coming out of this quadrant overall. It'll be awesome if we get I will be rooting for Arkansas over Kansas and do think that that's how things end up shaking down. A little Calipari versus Pitino will be unbelievable television there. So this is probably the section of the bracket I'm most excited about just from like a viewing experience. As far as the pure takes, I love St. John's to win. Feel really confident about that. Do lean on Arkansas, but I don't love this matchup for them. Kansas has been probably the most underwhelming team in the country all season. It's insane that they started the year as highly ranked as they were with all this belief and just really have underwhelmed there. I do like this Texas Tech team. Think they take their business pretty comfortably. So kind of surprised again by Sam's reaction there. And
time out.
Mm-hmm.
You're the number one John Calipari guy in the country. You're telling me you're not in love with this matchup?
I will be taking Arkansas. I do believe in John Calipari. I haven't loved how Arkansas have ended the year. I'll say that.
I get it. SEC. And I'm one of the people saying we can't just give the SEC every benefit of the doubt. There are some benefits I'm willing to give it. That schedule is so brutal. You look at Arkansas' schedule. They played such a gauntlet. And still, I mean, the last couple games, sure, a tough kind of close to the last couple games, but they really turned it around. Last 15 games, 9-6, and a really, really tough stretch. Like you go look at those 9 wins. They are not easy wins for them to have earned. And they've got a top 10 defense in that 15-game stretch. This team can strap it up and lock it up. I really, really like where Arkansas is at defensively. And I think a sign of like anything, like that's a sign this team is fighting for Cal. Like it was a rough start to the year. And I think you can point right to that game where they turned it around and beat Kentucky in Kentucky as this team had it right then. And Boogie Fland is allegedly coming back. I think he should stay away. They were 0-5 in the SEC when he was playing. Maybe he should stay away. Kansas, on the other hand, you have a Kansas team that's 7-8 since January 12th. I don't think that there's a lot to be excited about with the way that Kansas is playing. I think I saw 5.5 for Arkansas as a 5.5-point dog. If that's the case, woo, pig suey. I am all over the Hogs. I'm calling the Hogs.
And it is 5.5 is the number that I'm seeing there. And I will add, like, it's bizarre. And we've seen this in a couple different situations there, but like with Arkansas specifically, there was so much turnover from the coaching standpoint, the roster standpoint, but they have guys with some legitimate March Madness scars. A guy like John L. Davis is going to be huge in this and really in this entire run if they can put anything together there. So you've got me back on the Arkansas train there. Woo pig, baby, that I'm back in on the Razorbacks there. But I will very much. I think that might end up the St. John's versus Arkansas if that's how things shake out. Just from like a pure television standpoint of seeing Pitino coaching Pitino and Calipari facing off there, that might be my favorite match of this entire tournament. If that's how things break down.
I think it's how things will break down. I love that, and I'll just I'll tell you right now, I not only have St. John's coming out of this bottom half of this bracket, I have them coming out of the entire bracket, and I have them going all the way to the national championship. I
Wow.
love the Johnnies. I think they're the hottest team in the country. Rick Pitino is, in my opinion, the story of sports right now, not just a story of college basketball. I think he's the story of sports. I think what he has done with a program that in our entire cognizant lifetimes has not been a factor. They have not won the Big East in 25 years. You go and do that on the MSG floor. I think that's going to put some kind of juice in that team. And he said it best at the end. Maybe he saved the best for last. He's the GOAT. He's the greatest college basketball coach I've ever seen. And what he's done at every stop he's been. You look at the first season and then the second season, and what they've done is nothing short of remarkable. 25-2 in their last 27 games, 19-1 in their last 20 games since January 1st. St. John's and Houston are far and away the two best defenses in the country, and the only defense is under a 90 in defensive efficiency on Bart Torvik, which is far ahead of Michigan State at like 91 in third place in that time span. I think St. John's, their defense is going to carry the way. I know that the shooting isn't what I would normally pick for a run. Patino's the one coach I'll bet on to figure it out.
Yeah, and Patino's been a quote machine lately, by the way, with all the stuff that he's saying. Just hilarious. So I like that he's letting loose a little bit. And I will note, as far as the defense conversation, that yes, there's a lot of very good defensive teams across this country. There's plenty of metrics you can dive deeper into. With Houston and St. John specifically, there's another level that those two get to from a gear that it feels like they have 10 guys on the floor at times, the way they can swallow you up, they're rotating, swarming the ball, all those things. So I do think like it's very clear to me there's a steep drop off between Houston and St. John's and everyone else from a defensive perspective. And I think that play has come tournament time.
I was on mute there and couldn't take myself off. Let's kind of I'll look for a kind of an overall thing. Let's go to Duke. Actually, Sean, you're an NBA guy. Obviously, you're highly plugged in on the draft and all things Cooper Flag and the Flag watch. We were just talking about Flag versus Zion the other day, and the biggest news, if it's not Rick Pitino, is Cooper Flag. And when will Cooper Flag play? I think a big thing that I would say about that is the NCAA made sure that that's not a big problem, because I don't think that they have a hard draw to get to the Sweet 16. In fact, I said earlier, I think Cooper Flag could sit out to the Elite Eight, and I think he'll have a game to play.
Yeah, and it surprised me, by the way. I'm starting to see the takes of like, why would Cooper Flag come back? Or this might be the last time we see him at Duke. I don't think that's the way that guy ticks, and I don't think that there's any reason for that the case. For the same reason where you have this same belief that like the people taking that stance is kind of coming of the opinion of he's already got the number one pick lined up. Why would he risk it? I would push back on that, is because he's got the number one pick like lined up here, that even if he does come back and have a stinker, everyone's going to brush it off. Like, and from what I've seen of Cooper Flag, obviously never talked to him, interviewed him, or anything along those lines, but it seems like this is a dude that's fueled by competition, that he's going to want to step back out there. It seems pretty universal that if Cooper Flag is healthy and on this Duke team, they're the best team in college basketball. And even with the uncertainty, they're the betting favorite, and deservingly so here. So there's a lot of talent on that Duke roster. I mean, they won the ACC tournament without him, obviously, last night, that we just saw that there. So I'm buying in on this Duke team. They're obviously go to another level if Cooper Flag is there. But even if he isn't for a couple games, I share the same opinion, Mark, that I really have no doubt in them. I think this team is Duke. Con Knupples, the real deal. Common, is it Moloch? Is that how you say this guy's name? I've messed it up every time. But it's interesting. It's cool to watch him play. His approach to the game, I would honestly describe as like inquisitive. He's like still figuring out all the things that he can do, but the guy can play. So there's a lot of talent on that Duke team. I'm a believer.
Yeah, and Duke really, really impressive, obviously, to go ahead and win the ACC without Cooper Flag, when it would have been pretty easy to, I think, just pack it in. And say, we have a 1 seed. Let's, let Louisville have their fun here. But that's not what they did. They went ahead and they played their butts off, and they go ahead and win the ACC, dominate in pretty dominating fashion. And I think Duke is a pretty safe bet, maybe the safest bet in the sport to get to the Elite Eight. I have them going to the Final Four and beating Alabama. I think that's a really tough matchup. I think for both those teams, that's going to be really, really tough. I know Bama, people are not going to be high on them coming off of a tough loss to Florida. Grant Nelson, I think their most important player, got banged up in that game, missed the second half. It was a close game until he went out. Mark Sears also played banged up in that game, and maybe that's a concern. Maybe they're still banged up. I haven't heard concern about them long term too much, but I think you have to love the draw here for Duke to get all the way to the Final Four.
Yeah, no, I am in agreement there, and it will be interesting to see. I do share mostly your belief that like the NCAA is very vested in getting Cooper Flagg on the floor, and I think that there's a pretty sure chance that he is right from the start of this tournament. That seems to be what reports are indicating there. We'll see what level he's moving at. He's not a guy who I would say is overly built upon his athleticism if he is a little bit hampered there, but he's a difference maker for that team, and more specifically on the defensive end is where we'll feel his impact. So I do hope we get to see Coop. I think he's a guy that can take over like the NCAA experience for some people out there. So shout out to him. I hope he's healthy. Hope we get the best punch from Duke. And if they deliver it, the rest of the country is in some trouble.
And so I guess let's just run through it. Let's finish it off. Let's go to the Elite Eight. Do you have a bracket filled out here, Sean Bernard?
I do not. I've kind of been doing it offhand here. I should have written one down, but I can work through it with you.
Let's go to the top left region, and I'm pretty chalk here. I've got Auburn and Michigan State, and this is a tough one for me because there's a big part of me that wants to pick Auburn to not make the Final Four, obviously losing 3 of 4 in a row to go into the tournament. I've been all year saying I don't think that they're just this prohibitive number 1 team that's way better than the rest of the country. I still absolutely don't feel that way. I think them being the number 1 overall seed is a joke, to be honest, losing 3 of the last 4. But whatever, it's not that big of a deal. 1 seeds are 1 seeds. So I just don't have a team in this region that I want to make the Final Four, that I want to put in, and that I feel like, oh, if you gave me a St. John's in the Auburn region, if you gave me a Maryland in the Auburn region, you gave me a Texas Tech, you gave me an Alabama, maybe even a Wisconsin, but I just, Michigan State's the closest thing that I'm going to get to that in this region. And I can't pull the trigger. I don't know if they have the top end talent. Izzo's went on and on all year about how this is his favorite team because it's one of his least talented teams. I get it. I don't think one of his least talented teams is getting to the Final Four when he's had plenty of teams that haven't made the Final Four. Obviously, every draw is different, every tourney is different, every team's different. And Izzo's done a hell of a job. But I don't think Michigan State's getting to the Final Four.
Yeah, I do mostly agree with that. I do want to ask. I apologize if I missed this early on here. But Michigan, what's your outlook for Michigan? Is that a team that you have no belief in?
No, I like Michigan, but I think they got a nightmare 12 seed with UC San Diego, and specifically for not just because I like UC San Diego, but specifically for Michigan, who's been one of the worst teams in the country at turnovers. Dusty May, on Part of My Take, talked about how him and a few other coaches in the country whose teams were struggling with turnovers had a group chat with practice techniques and drills that could work to limit turnovers. And I guess I forget who it was. He said that there was a team that's really, really turned it around. And he was asking them what I think it might have been Arkansas, might have been someone on Calipari's staff. I can't remember who it was, but they were asking like, what did you do to turn it around? And they told him the drill, and Dusty's like, oh, damn it, we've done that 100 times and it hasn't done anything. So I think that shows how frustrated he is. Obviously, they go and win the Big Ten tournament. No one's talking about turnovers. That has been the problem all year. UC San Diego second in the country at forcing turnovers. They've got a guy who gets 3.2 steals per game.
Wow.
Leader in the country. They have another guy who gets 2.5, another guy who gets 1.5. Like, they are just an absolute juggernaut in terms of forcing turnovers. A little bit like those Havoc, Shaka Smart VCU teams of the past when they started making their runs. Very similar for UC San Diego. They've won 15 straight. They had a 12-game win streak before that. So they've had 2 really, really long prolonged kind of periods of success. They're also top 10 in 3-point rate and top 50 in 3-point efficiency. You're talking about a team and they're 6th in limiting turnovers. They don't turn the ball over. You don't turn the ball over. They turn you over, and they shoot more threes than you. I think that's going to be tough for Michigan. Let's bring Joe Tanzi in here. There we go. And Joe Tanzi, how we feeling? Selection Sunday. Happy holiday, brother.
It's nice to see a bracket in front of me. It's so nice. It really is.
It really. I had an empty one that I printed out and filled along. I still have to get a few paper ones. I'll be going to my a little apartment complex clubhouse and printing out a couple brackets for myself after this. So while I'm listening, of course, to Brace Beef and McClay. But biggest takeaway when this bracket came out? You can go any way you want, Joe. Where are you going?
I'm glad West Virginia's not in.
Agreed.
I think that's the biggest thing. Carolina getting in, it is what it is, right?
I agree.
Like, I don't care.
I hate it, but it is what it is.
Yeah,
I'm happy.
it is.
Meh. That's kind of how I feel about it.
It is interesting though that we have two national championship participants from the last 3 years playing in the first four this time around. That's an interesting factoid. Just to, they've been two very consistent teams: San Diego State, North Carolina. I guess the initial thing to me is which team makes the run from the first four, because every year except for 2019 that a team has won a first round game that had won in the first four. And looking at the bracket, really initial thoughts is I think that San Diego State Carolina winners got a chance against Ole Miss.
I agree.
I think that's probably your trendsetter there. The other things I looked at, Memphis, Colorado State intrigues me in the 5-12 game. I know this kind of goes against the Mountain West rule that we've had over previous years, right? But Memphis, they played with fire that entire AAC tournament, and they've done this. They've done this for a few years now under Penny in the postseason. So why is it going to change now? Colorado State hot. It's Nico Medved's last ride at Colorado State. He's going to get the job at Minnesota. So that one intrigues me. Akron intrigues me as well.
Agreed.
Against Arizona. That's the one where I'm kind of looking at like realistic kind of upsets for 12s and 13s. I know a lot of people are going to be on High Point because of their win streak. Liberty, I think that's a horrible matchup for them against Oregon. So I don't see a Cinderella run there. I guess you can say the exact same thing for Grand Canyon against Maryland. Grand Canyon likes to play it slow, drawn out game in the 60s. That ain't happening there. Everybody and your mom is going to be on the Yale UC San Diego upset train.
I'm right there. Less on Yale, more on UC San Diego. And I like Michigan, so it's tough for me to fade Michigan. But UC San Diego, I think, is the perfect matchup for them. As I was just saying to Sean, they're number 2 in the country at forcing turnovers. That's obviously been Michigan's problem all year long. They also they're top 10 in 3-point rate, top 50 in 3-point efficiency. They don't turn the ball over, 6th in limiting turnovers on the offensive side in the country. So I really, if Michigan got any other 12 seed, I think I have them in the Sweet 16. But I really do believe in the San Diego team.
I think you have to look at variance, right? Like at their best, Michigan destroys this team. You also have you also have to think about this. Is San Diego just happy to be there? It's their first ever tournament bid in program history. Like, they've put a lot into just getting there. And also, look, coaching for me, that's one of the biggest X factors. Dusty Mays had a deep run in March with Florida Atlantic. I think that's also an X factor to me. And I look at the bigs too. What happens if Michigan just feeds Wolf and Golden for 40 minutes? Can UC San Diego stop that? Probably not. So I think, to me, there's just too many red flags with that matchup. I think the one that I think this is really kind of a fate of the one team, but Lipscomb's got some intrigue.
Okay.
Only because the Iowa State
big
situation.
line.
Huge line. I would assume so. But the reason I say this is because we're looking at the kind of unexpected teams, right? Because everybody in the world is going to be on Yale because of last year. And they're going to be on UC San Diego because they're the hot team, and Michigan's inconsistent and they're a 12 seed. But if you look at just over the last month, we've been talking about fading Iowa State in the group chat for so long at this point, right? So why wouldn't that apply to the NCAA tournament? I think Keyshawn Gilbert's already ruled out. And you have a team in Lipscomb. They've only have one loss since the start of February. They rank top 50 in 2-point and 3-point efficiency on KenPom, 7th in free throw shooting. Like, there's a lot of offensive metrics there. I mean, look, they're different teams, obviously, because BYU is a Big 12 team. But watch that BYU Iowa State game, right? That's high scoring. Iowa State, Curtis Jones had one of his best days ever. And it still wasn't enough because BYU could shoot the ball. And they eventually won that game. So what if a similar type game plays out against a team that literally nobody is going to pick? Like, I
Let me
think
throw it.
go ahead.
Sorry about that. Let me throw a matchup at you that I was talking earlier. I had the entire bracket filled out and didn't have this one game filled out. I can't figure it out. It's such a styles clash. Missouri Drake. Where are you going in that matchup? I have no idea. It's my least confident game in the entire bracket. First, second, third, fourth round, whatever it is. I have no idea what to do with it.
I will say there's to that point, because it's in that part of the bracket, there's always one game in the first round that you look back on, whether it's Thursday or Friday night, and be like, oh, that game happened.
Yeah.
That's Texas Tech, UNC Wilmington. It always feels
Sam's
like
big on UNCW. Sam
Yeah,
was hyping him up. Me and Bernard love Texas Tech.
it always feels like Texas Tech or Iowa State or a team like that plays like a 77-50 type game.
Yeah.
And it just gets lost in the shuffle, and we don't even talk about it. I think that's that game. God, that sounds like an awful Missouri and Drake. Like, that really is like, it's the ultimate variance matchup, isn't it? Because who knows? I don't know where to go in that one. I would think Missouri.
That's what I have tentatively in my head is Missouri. I will say, I say this a lot with brackets. And if you have a situation like that, like you can't figure out what to do in Missouri Drake, and you love Texas Tech no matter what, you're picking Texas Tech to the Sweet 16. Usually I say get a little funky, mess with it. You pick the upset if you're only if you have them only going to the second round anyway, and you have them out. If it's that 50-50 for you can't decide, usually I say side with picking the upset. I've kind of done that in a couple situations here, so I think I might zag there and go with Missouri here. But one more thing before I get to the Elite Eight for all of us, before our Final Fours, Duke. I think my biggest takeaway from this entire bracket is what a draw for the Dukies, especially into the to get to the Elite Eight, I should say. And I think
score a lot of points. They're gonna have to score a lot of points in those games
to get to the Elite Eight. You're saying
to get to the Final Four. If Chalk holds,
Final Four, yeah, the Elite Eight matchup would be tough. Either Bama or Wisconsin, I think, are both really, really tough matchups. But do you think anyone in that top half of that Duke region scares you in terms of keeping them out of the Elite Eight?
Probably not, but we also have to see what Cooper Flag is like. I wouldn't expect to see him until the second round.
Agreed.
And I mean, 8-9 winners can always be a little frisky, as we've seen in years past. You know, we usually see one of the top seeds go down. I will say, because I spotted this right away, the McNeese High Point part of the bracket as well. I'm going to apply the same thinking of the San Diego Yale portion of the bracket. Those are your four most popular upset teams. I can see it coming from a mile away. UC San Diego is the heartwarming story. Yale won last year against Auburn.
McNeese has Will Wade and Amir Khan.
They have Will Wade, who's how many feet does he have out the door at this point?
Yeah, however many he can. He can. It's a damn good offer. So I think I agree with you on Clemson. I love Clemson in that matchup. I'll be laying the points with Clemson.
Clemson-Purdue would be a fantastic second-round game.
But I think Purdue stinks. I more so than the other matchups, I think Purdue, 362nd in 2-point defense since January 1st is the stat with Purdue. They just have no resistance on getting to the basket there. So,
well, then that gives my guy Bodo at Jocelyn Bodo at High Point.
I love it. I love it. I think High Point's going to be fun in that matchup. I don't know what the line is there. I'm excited to kind of.
I think their team total is going to be interesting in that game.
Interesting.
To go with that stat, they like to attack the rim. Bodo is a really good rim protector, and Keza Jiffa, one of the point guards you'll fall in love with in the tournament. He loves to drive as well. I think specifically, High Point team total might be an early look.
Let's go to the Final Four. Let's all give our Final Fours here. Coming out of the top left region, I've got Auburn beating Michigan State. I think, Sean Bernard, you're in the same boat there.
We're in the South, you're talking? Yeah.
The top left, is that that's the South, yes.
South, yes, I do. I want to get off Auburn, man. I really don't love them as a basketball team, but I don't see a team in this bracket that I think can beat them, to be perfectly honest. And my frustration with them, I've talked to you about this on Saturday, Mark, but it feels like every single game that there's just a couple stupid things that they do that drive me crazy. And it feels like that they make way too many mistakes to kind of measure up to these true top teams. But then again, they're the number one team in the country. They have been for stretches this season. They look very good at their peak, and there's no arguing that. So I think I am locking in with Auburn getting the the job done there, but don't feel great about it.
Tansy?
This is just gut look because I'm really looking at the brackets for the first time. I'll give you a hot take. I don't want to do predictions just yet, but whoever wins that San Diego State North Carolina game could easily make the Sweet 16.
Got you. Bottom left here, I have a curveball with Maryland going to the Elite Eight, but I have St. John's taking down Maryland and St. John's going all the way to the Final Four. Sean Bernard, where you at?
Yeah, St. John's over to Louisville is my pick in this bracket.
Wow,
there.
Louisville.
So, yeah, I'm buying in on Louisville a little bit. I think they're a fun story.
They're
cool
not
team.
in the same
Oh, no,
bracket.
wrong bracket. Wrong
Am I in the
bracket.
wrong
That's top left.
What am I looking at? The West?
Yeah, this is Florida
West.
and UConn, Oklahoma is the 8-9.
Oh, okay, I got you. All right, let me pick this out. I should have done the Mark Henry Jr. write it down technique for sure. But I am rolling with St. John's to come out of this portion of the bracket. I do think that they got a really chance of winning it all this year. I love Pitino's squad. They're obviously cooking for him defensively. I think they're a level that only them in Houston can reach. So I think St. John is the winner of this region.
Tansy, what do you got for me?
Just a quick take on it. I think St. John's, Arkansas would be a fascinating stylistic matchup. Kansas is dead to me. I think Arkansas. So is Arkansas, but I mean, at least Arkansas, St. John's gives you the storyline of the century.
I agree. Top right, we just broke it down. I've got Duke over Bama, a little bit of chalk there in the top right. Sean?
Yeah, I'm on Duke as well. And I honestly, it did move me a little bit the way that they played without Cooper Flagg, that I was impressed with them as a complete team there. Flagg's kind of the ceiling raiser there and a guy that I do expect to look like himself once he does inevitably return to the court there. But I think without him, that they would still be considered national champion contenders. And I think that's pretty telling for the rest of the roster. So I do think Duke's by far the best team in this portion of the bracket here, and do think they ultimately end up at the Final Four.
Tansy?
I think this is a pretty clear bracket if Cooper Flagg is healthy. I could also see this being a pretty quick run to the final for Duke, as much as I hate to say that.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. Bottom right, last bracket. For the first time ever in a bracket, but when I got Houston's name, I filled it out to the champion. I didn't wait to see the rest of the region. I just wrote them all the way through. I didn't care who was going to be in the region. I will say, not a great 8-9. Gonzaga, Georgia, a little scary. But I will say, I believe in this Houston team more than I've ever believed. And I'm not the guy who picks the 1 seed. Like, I usually pick like a 2 or a 3. I hit big with Nova in 2016. But I love Houston. They've lost 4 games, 3 in overtime, 14 combined points in those 4 losses that they've lost by. They're number 1 in Bart Torvik, 26-1 in their last 27 games, 2 13-game win streaks. And what's different this year with Houston, their 3 top scorers shoot 42% from 3 on a combined 16 3-point attempts. 7 of the top 8 guys were on the team last year that made a run to the Sweet 16. They only got hurt. They only lost to a good Duke team when their best player got hurt in that game. They've been knocking on the door too long. I think this is the year. I think Houston's winning it all.
Yeah, LJ Cryer leading the conference in 3-point shooting, an experienced roster. I'm with you on Houston, Mark, and I am a subscriber to the theory that defense wins championships. It does really feel like there's a level that this team gets to where it feels like they got 10 guys on the floor. They're swarming you, they're blitzing you, they're forcing turnovers, they're all over the place, and I think that pays its toll throughout this tournament. So I'm in on Houston. I think they got a pretty good chance of winning it all as well. I feel really good about them getting out of this portion of the bracket.
Tansy, bottom right?
When I look at title contenders, I like to pick apart the flaws first, right? Because then you're peeling back the layers of the onion. Auburn, they've lost 3 of 4. Yes, they're very good. Florida, did going all the way to the SEC championship game actually hurt them? That's happened in the past with the SEC and the Big Ten.
Their coaches never won a tournament game, Florida.
Also a big thing. Duke, Cooper Flagg, if he's healthy, they're in great shape. Houston has the least amount of flaws of the 4 number 1 seeds.
You put it perfectly.
It's very, very easy. That being said, that means they're probably going to lose in the second round to Gonzaga.
All right. Get out of here, Tansy. You put it perfectly, though. I love the way you just wrapped a bow on this show. Great stuff from Sam. Great stuff from Sean. Thanks to Joe Tansy for popping on. Everybody go check him out on Twitter. Check out his stuff over on Bleacher Report. Check him out at JTansy90 on Twitter. That's going to do it for this show. Let's hand it over to Sean Brace, Beef, and Nick McClay down there in the basement over there at Sean Brace's house. What'd you say? Tansy went away, but I think Tansy said magical things happen in the basement. So, Tough Cover Country, let's ride.